So there are things that you need to understand that are needed to be a man. First off, let's debunk this masculinity, liberal, conservative. All this type of jargon has nothing to do with you as a man. Your political stance has nothing to do with you as a man. First of all, what does it mean to be a man? One of the biggest challenges I found now, I've been living a long time, 53 years old, came up during the generation before the internet. Which means there's an understanding that I have that some of you may not have, especially my young brothers who are coming up with families. First off is understanding what it takes for you as predominantly black man, for that matter, who grew up more than likely, if you like me, in a dysfunctional home. How do you have a wife, have a kid, and have any level of emotional restraint, any level of emotional intelligence, any connection with your kid in what we call a positive emotional way, simply because you may not have experienced it? Because if your father is my age, then you may be a person who's experienced a lot of negative emotional experiences because of the lack of true emotional connection that your dad had with his dad. The reality of it is, when we were growing up, there was no "how was your day?" There was no communication of "how was school, son?" It was come home, eat, wake up, go back to work as a man. So there was none of this understanding of how to communicate with your son or your daughter. So growing up for me, I had to learn how to make adjustments from the painful experiences that I had, which is a dad who wasn't present. And so the key is this, and this is the first lesson I learned, and I was 30-something years old before I learned this lesson, that all of the negative emotional experiences I had of feeling neglected, abandoned, and unloved, that I suppressed for years, still stayed with me even though I was a grown man with a wife and with kids. And it wasn't until that moment, and transparent true moment, I moved to my cousin's house Thanksgiving Day. My wife got our kids over there. This is my cousin's house on my dad's side, the dad who I was not present with. My uncle was there. They're in Southern California. We drove 2 hours. We were in Southern California. Drove a little bit further, visited him, spent time with him. And at the end of the Thanksgiving dinner, my wife and I were leaving. And when we were leaving, it felt like somebody hit me with a ton of emotional bricks. I sat in the car and I cried and I wept for about 15 minutes. And I didn't know where it came from. It came from me seeing my uncle and seeing what I missed. And some of you guys may be in situations like that right now, where when you come into your family's presence, especially if it was your parents' side who wasn't present, you feel a level of pain, a level of disconnect, and that is because of the trauma that you've experienced. And it wasn't until then that I realized, oh, I'm not over this. I'm 30-something years old. How come I'm not over this? And I realized emotions don't age, they stay with us. And so what I had to do from that moment and growing toward acceptance of my pain and being able to deal with it by processing it, I was able later to learn how to communicate with my wife, because I would only feel the pain, try to suppress it, and all of the pain that I was trying to suppress, it wasn't going anywhere. It was still with me, and I would just project that onto my wife. So I would yell, holler, short-tempered, short-fused, because I wasn't aware of my own traumatic pain. And as a man, real talk, brothers, the only way we grow is when we learn how to deal with us, when we process us. When you grow up and you had to suppress your pain, suppress your emotional experiences, you had to keep quiet, you couldn't cry, you couldn't communicate, couldn't do none of that stuff because you may have grown up in an abusive home, neglective home, you may have suffered a great deal in your life. Listen to me, I've been there. The only way to grow through that is really to process your pain. Stop feeling it and reacting it. This is what I want you to do. I want you to feel it, then I want you to ask yourself. I want you to question it. I want you to push back on it. I want you basically not to allow it to trigger you and you react. I want you to practice that feeling, proving its truth to you. In other words, you're angry. Okay, push back on it. Why are you angry? What was said? What was done? Why are you frustrated? You determine that before you say a word. Because when you determine that before you say a word, what you're doing is you are learning how to process your feeling. Here's the real reality of it. As humans, we are binary, right? We're emotional and we are rational. So here's the thing. I'm an emotional person and I'm rational. Majority of all your purchases are made on emotional feeling. That $200,000 car, that $70,000 car that you want, or you may have, guess what? You didn't need the $70,000 car, but you wanted it. Why? Because there was the emotional connection you had with it. Same thing with your swag, same thing with your woman, same thing with it. It's an emotional connection. To say any other thing is denying the truth. So let's be real. That's what you're dealing with. So understand, you're emotional and you're rational. You know how to think, strategize, and implement strategy. Here it is. Why? Because you play football, baseball, whatever, basketball, all that strategy, hockey on the other side. Strategy. Listen, because you know strategy, you know how to do things. Here's what I need you to understand. When you are emotionally triggered, I need you to push rationally against that emotional experience inwardly. Now, you do it good with your woman because you're like, that don't make any sense. You're too emotional. Listen, check it, meaning put it aside, and now I want you to do that same practice, not to your woman, but to yourself. Because I need you to challenge why you tripping. Challenge why you're angry. Challenge why you're upset. Because once you challenge it, here's the reality. You are going to discover why you are in the space you're in. And that's where you need to be at. Because when you realize your own space, your own pain, what triggers you, whether it's neglect, whether it's abandonment, whether it's feeling unloved, whether it's feeling disrespected, whether it's feeling broken, whatever that is, you need to discover that for yourself. That is the first real step to masculinity. Because masculinity is living out your manhood, living out the responsibility of covering that woman and that child. Which is this, it first happens emotionally. A woman and a child must feel emotionally safe with you. The way they do that is when you as the rock in the home, your spouse's emotional experience with your behavior, with your action, or maybe what they're going through. And because of your masculinity, and you are the rock of the house, you validate that experience. In other words, you allow her to communicate to you, and you take that emotional experience that she's having and you validate it. Baby, I'm worried. I don't know how we gonna get through this. Baby, I understand. I can understand why you worry. I see that, but it's gonna be okay. I got you. You are strong enough, I'm strong enough. We got this. So what am I? I'm validating. I'm not pushing back. Girl, why are you tripping? Why are you always tripping? This is the covering part, because when your wife feel covered, when she feels like you got her back, she's gonna communicate it like it is. If she's not communicating it, it's probably because of your lack of understanding of your role. And I did it for years, man. I've been married 26 years. All of them weren't good. The first 10, 12 was brutal on my wife because I had no idea what it was to be a man, what it was to hear her experience and not push back against it. It's not attack. When your wife is communicating and when she is emoting, she is sharing with you her experience. Now it's up for you to validate it, which is say it's okay for you to be safe and for you to share. I want you to know we're good, but I also want you to know that you can share, because that's going to allow her to flourish. As men, we're protectors, we're providers, but we're called to cultivate. How do I cultivate? I create an environment in my home that's conducive for my wife and children to feel that they can be themselves. That's another listen. Not what you want them to be in terms of your idea, but they can be themselves. Because stewardship is you stewarding, watching, maintaining, growing what's there. And how do I do that? I give it room, right? Certain plants grow to a certain size based on the pot that it is in. And when a lot of times when you want that plant to grow, you have to repot it, put it in a bigger pot. Why? So its roots can grow. And when you allow your children to have room, when you allow your wife to have room, regardless of what people may say and what people may, give them room to grow. How do I give room to grow? I allow them to communicate their experience, and I allow them to feel that they can talk. Because as a man growing up, for me, growing up in a society where there was no talk, it was no man, your dad is talking to you about your day. You ain't even see your dad. I didn't even see my biological father, so I couldn't have that experience. So I'm sharing with you the very nature of having a strong foundation in your home. Is not hollering and cussing because you upset and because you're broken, because you didn't get acceptance from your father. You didn't get acceptance from your mother. You didn't have an emotional connection with them. Because you didn't have an emotional connection with them, you don't believe it's needed and it's valid. And the reason why you don't is because that is your emotional template. It's your emotional disposition. The reason you have that emotional template is because when you were growing up, you never had the affection, the validation, or the experience of love. And when you don't have that from your primary caregiver, there's brokenness. And the brokenness you don't realize until you're 40 something or you're 50. And then you're wondering why you mistreated your wife and your children all those years. And you're not satisfied with you, with who you become, simply because you realize you didn't want to give them what you had. It's like walking around with a disease, not wanting to give it away. But you didn't know that every time you communicated, you kept giving that disease away. The disease of neglect, the disease of being unloved, the disease of feeling like you're not wanted. And because you felt that way, you in your relationship the same way. So you don't communicate your needs or your feelings, you suppress them. And the way you react is either one, you close off, two, you react and blow up at a certain time because you were trying to hold that pain in. Listen, I've been there. And the only way to deal with that again is to process it. Stop holding on to it. Processing the experience is you checking it, looking for the validation so that you can have a level of understanding for yourself first. That creates the connection. If you found this video valuable, like it. Subscribe it. Follow me on Instagram. Follow me on YouTube. We're on YouTube, Facebook. I put out content consistently. I work with couples and I work with men and I work with C-suite executives in coaching and helping develop you and connect you with what you're actually feeling and dealing with so you can be the best version of yourself. My name is Jimmy. Look forward to seeing you in the next video.